On this episode, we're going to be talking, Janis and I, and continuing her series on L. Ron Hubbard's Messengers, the Commodores' Messengers, the history of it. And this is going to carry on at the secret location in La Quinta at W. And Janis is going to tell stories about when her mother passed away and how Hubbard dealt with that and how she had to deal with that. And also some other stories about the setting up of the movie cinema organization at that time. And I think you're going to find this interesting, and we hope you enjoy it. Stay tuned. Welcome, everybody, to Scientology Peeling the Onion. My name is Mark Fisher. I'm here with my co-host, Janis Gillham Grady. Hi, Janis. How you doing today?
Hey, Mark. I'm good. G'day, everybody, and welcome to Peeling the Onion.
That's right. And we're going back to carry on with a series that we haven't done in a few months now, actually, because we've had so many people that we've been interviewing. But this is a show where, Janis, you are not only the co-host, you're also the guest. This is L. Ron Hubbard's Messenger series, which is the history of the Commodores' Messengers. And the last one, you want to go ahead and say where we ended off the last one, and then we'll get going on the new one.
Yeah, the last one was started when the FBI raided La Quinta.
Well, they didn't raid there. They raided L.A. They raided California, right?
We were living in La Quinta when the FBI raided the Los Angeles and the D.C. offices, and Hubbard was like in total fear and took off for Sparks. So I told the story about what happened when he was in Sparks with Dee Dee and Claire and Pat Broker. And then that ended off where he was coming back to La Quinta, which was also called WHQ for Winter Headquarters. So Hubbard was going to come back to there, and he wanted to get into doing movies for training films on Scientology so that people could learn Scientology basics by watching the training films. So he had us messengers all studying cine film. And we all had to start with the 5 C's, and this is a copy of the book.
5 C's of cinematography, yeah.
5, yes, cinematography. So we all had to study that. And so he came back, and we all kind of fell back into the same routine as before with the added function of cine. Hubbard lived at Rifle, and let me bring up the picture of Rifle. So Hubbard lived here on this property, which was called Rifle. Before we even got the property, there was like a group of properties all kind of laying out together, where one was called Palms, and it had orchards of palm trees, date trees, and grew dates. And then the other one was called Olives, which also had date fields, and they also had olive trees, so that's why it was called Olives. And then behind that was another property called the Rancho, not the Ranchos, that's Slater. We had the ranch house down there and a bunkhouse, and we had some stables, which were turned into grounds quarters. And then we also had the date packing plant. And here it is here, the top right, you'll see number 5, that was Palms, and then there's the date fields behind it. The next property in the middle is Olives with date fields behind it. And then the next property is alfalfa fields, and then you've got the date packing plant. And then further at the bottom is Rifle, where Hubbard lived.
So, let me go ahead. I've got some photos we can show of these properties real quick and just see what they are. That's Rifle?
Yes, that's Rifle. And I can show people, if you go back a sec, I can show people, if you look over on the right-hand side, you'll see a blue door. And that is the door into the courtyard. And immediately on the right was Hubbard's office. And if you go to the back of the property, and you can go to the next slide, was where there was a guest house kitchen, and that's where Hubbard lived. You can see there on the left a swimming pool, and then lower down is a building. And there was 2 bedrooms there and a kitchen, with Hubbard living in the bottom left corner and Mary Sue on the right side of that kitchenette guest house.
Okay.
Now, with this property also in the front there, on the right side is a standalone building. That was also stables where Hubbard stored all of his furniture that had come off the ship and been with us in Clearwater and transported out. So that was all stored there. So life went back to normal, where Hubbard would drive around the property. John Brousseau was the chauffeur for Hubbard.
Go ahead.
And
I'm going to show these properties. This is Olives?
Yeah, this is Olives, and the very front room there on the right, that was L. Ron Hubbard's LRH External Communications Office. So that's where all communications into the base here in La Quinta would all go there, and from there they would distribute to the Guardian's office, or the Controller's office, which headed up the Guardian's office. Mary Sue was the Controller, and she had some staff who were deputies for her in running the Guardian's office, which was in England at Worldwide. So all communications would go there, and they would deliver it to the Controller's office, to the messengers, and over to Rifle, to Hubbard, or Mary Sue, who was there.
Is this also Olives?
That's also Olives. And in that same building was the Controller's office and also the Commodore's messengers. We had an office in there as well. And this is just another angle of Olives. Olives used to have a beautiful swimming pool with an island of palm trees, and we'd shown some pictures of that with Stu sitting there at the pool. And when this property was sold to the La Quinta Hotel, which was directly across the road, they filled in the swimming pool and turned it all into tennis courts. They tore down the date fields and turned those into tennis courts. They tore down date packing plant, which we used for Cine. And also LRH Audio was in there, where LRH would go do voiceovers for the films. And he would also go in there and edit previous lectures that he had done to get the snaps and crackles out of it. But he wasn't into removing people from his lectures like Mary Sue, his wife. She was in all those lectures that he edited, where later on in the years, Miscavige had her and any mention of SPs all kind of edited out. But Hubbard had left those in. This was a picture I took in 2018 of Palms, and that was where our crew dining room was, and also some staff berthing. And there's another picture of Palms there. And this here is it was called the Longhouse. And this is where the messengers lived, in the one on the left, and Suzette Hubbard lived on the one on the right. Suzette had the same size room as like 6 or 8 of us other girls who were in a dormitory, same size rooms. And then also over further to the left was Arthur Hubbard had his own little house as well. This here is the library, where if you go in there, it's on the left, there was these huge racks of shelves of books and a ladder to climb up there. And that was the messenger's men's dorm. So there was probably about 4 to 6 guys who lived in there, along with all the books.
Including David Miscavige at the time, I'm sure.
Including David Miscavige, yes. But off of the library there was a kitchen. And when Hubbard was in Sparks, that's where we hung out and did phone watch. In case someone phoned us, we could.
Yeah,
someone was there.
You talked about that on the last one.
Yeah,
Sparks, where you guys are sitting there, Annie's cooking or teaching how to bake or something. I forget what it was.
Annie and I would make pavlova with meringue. Right. Yeah, so we'd make meringue. Yeah. And that's also where we typed Revolt in the Stars, the LRH film. So this is another angle of palms. And if you look on the left there, there's that little house with a door. That's where my brother and his wife, Doreen, lived. And that's attached to the garage. And the garage is where the RPF lived, which will be in the next series, in Messenger Series 11. I'll discuss the RPF and my experience with that. And that's just one of the date fields. So let me go on with the story now.
You go right ahead.
Yeah, so Hubbard comes back and we fall back into the same routine and checking the traffic for him, going for walks with him, driving around the property with him, taking notes, taking dictations, and so forth. And then he slowly started getting into the cine. And this was a picture of him taken around that time period when we were shooting films. He had the long sideburns and his hair was pretty long in the back. And that's how he looked. When he wanted to look like a Scientology founder, his sideburns would have been trimmed and much shorter, and he'd look like what everyone recognizes him as.
Yeah, and I remember this was given out as a gift to all the staff members in the Sea Org, because I got one. We all got actually there's more to this photo. He's actually sitting on like a cine, a movie trolley or whatever, but he's got cowboy boots on, and he's in full Western gear. And I'll never forget, we got given it by the LRH public relations officer. And so everybody had it, and we had him on our desk because it was a great photo of him.
Yeah. Yep. That's correct.
Yeah.
All right. So let's remove that one. And okay. So things have got back to normal, and we started to do shoots. And meanwhile, no, we hadn't started the shoots yet because my sister wasn't there. Because my mother, while Hubbard was in Sparks, she got very sick. And she had a stroke. And I think I've talked about this before, where I was planning to take a leave of absence to go spend a week with her. And she had just gone to Mexico. And the plan was when she came back, I would go down. And that's when I got a letter from her, and it just didn't make sense, the letter. And I talked to Annie, and then Annie had told me that she'd been sick, that I should delay going down there on my leave because I'd just be hanging out with the person who's sick in bed, and that she was being taken care of. Her photo was being case supervised. Ray Midoff was giving her daily sessions. And she'd been in Mexico when she had the stroke, and Heber and everyone else she was with just put her on a plane and sent her back to Los Angeles on her own, where she couldn't use her arm apparently, and she was slurring words. Anyway, my sister got a message saying, your mom is really sick and they're not planning to tell you. So that's when my sister went over and found her delirious in her room at the Wilcox. So Terry called an ambulance and called 911 and got an ambulance to take her to the hospital. And that's where they found she had a brain tumor. And apparently it was like the size of a grapefruit or something ridiculous.
Wow.
And it explained the headaches that they'd been trying to order out on her. No one had bothered to get an x-ray or something done to find out why is she getting these headaches. Well, she had a tumor. So I then remained working with Hubbard and so forth while this was going on. And then a report was sent up to Hubbard when he got back telling him that Yvonne was really sick. And meanwhile, they'd sent her to Flag for auditing. And when she got to Flag is when they found 3 tumors, not just one. So Hubbard, getting reports that she was at Flag and was really sick, he sent down a case supervisor instructions to the director of processing to take her in and find out, does she want to address these tumors and it'll take a long while, but does she want to address it? or does she want to just drop the body and get a new body and start off fresh? Because that's the view of a Scientologist is, just drop the body and get a new one, and it'll be much easier than going through. Well, the tumors were non-operable, so it would be meaning a lot of auditing to try and decrease the size of those tumors. So apparently her answer to the director of processing when he was checking with her was she wanted to just drop the body. So that's when Hubbard came up with the process to be done when someone dies or they're dying, and you instruct them to go and find a planet and go around that planet. And so Mom was given those instructions, and the people who were with her was my sister, my dad, and his girlfriend, Kay Gonslin. And she was a dentist from Louisiana. So they were with my mother when she passed and at the hospital. And Dad had been in Australia, and he came back when Terry told him what was going on, and Hubbard was also there. But my brother and I had not really been told anything as to how serious it was, and that it was at the point of death. And Hubbard actually CS'd both my brothers and my folders to prepare us for her death. And that's where I was in session with Dan Kuhn, and I was kind of wondering, well, no one's told me it's this bad. Why is Hubbard having me in session to get off any upset I might have? And so otherwise, I would, if I knew she was dying, I would have been on a plane, but I didn't know that. No one had told us how serious it was, just that she was ill and getting some auditing. And it wasn't until Hubbard had me taken in session that I was kind of still trying to find out more. And then what happened is she actually passed away, and I was on Liberty that day, and I'd been at the movies, and I'm driving back, and I just kind of felt she was there with me. And I just had a spiritual conversation with her, and I was like, something's gone on. Why is she here? And I get back to the base, and I find that my watch had stopped at that time that she had visited me while I was driving back to the base.
Wow.
And as soon as I got back, Dan Kuhn took me in session and broke the news to me that my mother had passed, and took me in session again. And the next day, my brother and I got together and like, we're going to go to Florida and go to her funeral, her celebration of life. And I went to Hubbard because I was on watch. I went on watch, and I told him, I said, I'm going to be taking a few days off. I'm going to Clearwater to my mother's celebration of life. And he kind of looked at me and was like, why would you do that? And I'm like, it's my mother. And he was like, oh, okay. But it was like, it kind of struck me kind of strange when he said, why would I do that? And,
like he brushed it off.
Yeah, but he knew I'd been separated for 11 years and only seen her maybe 5 or 6 times in 11 years. So she really wasn't a mother, and I even had that separation because she wasn't a mother to me. She was my mother, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, she wasn't around to raise you through your teenage years, whatever, right?
Exactly. Yeah, Scientology was a bigger priority to her than her own children, is, how I always felt. So, and Hubbard was more of the fatherly figure towards all us messengers, and was there, more so than my own parents. So anyway, my brother and I ended up joining my sister in Clearwater. Here's a picture of me, my brother, and Doreen Doe in Clearwater at her celebration of life. And I forgot to add the other one. There's one with David Mayo and Tony Dunleavy and Liz Gablehouse. We're all there because we had a little service. And it was interesting at the service. We're all sitting there, and Tony's up there doing the service, and this palm starts moving in the corner. And I'm kind of, there's no wind. And everyone notices this tree is moving and there's no wind, and we're all looking around. And as Tony's talking about Yvonne and so forth, anyway, we figured that was her just showing that she's there with us. Anyway.
Who was it? Tony Dunleavy?
Tony Dunleavy. He was the staff captain, the Commodore staff captain at that time. Anyway, so after that, I then returned to the base in La Quinta, and I'm back on watch. And Hubbard and Mary Sue often, they wrote each other every single day. And the messengers would get Mary Sue's letter, and we were instructed to go through it and retype it so that to take out any bad news. And the bad news was her talking about her legal defense and the FBI raid and her court case and all the criminality that the Guardian's office did. We had to take that out because he didn't want to see any of that.
Was that his instruction to do that?
Yes, that was his instructions. And that's where we would retype her letters and just tell him her other news. And I happened to be on watch when her letter came in about having heard my mother had passed. So when it came time to answer Mary Sue's letter, we always sat at the desk with the typewriter, and he sat in his chair. He didn't have a desk. He stood up at a counter, and or he dictated to us from his chair. So I'm sitting there to type up the dictation of his answer to Mary Sue. And in that answer, he's telling Mary Sue about how he found out about it and his instructions to David Mayo and the director of processing to check on what Yvonne wanted to do. And I'm sitting there typing away, and it was very re-stimulative for me because she'd only been dead maybe 5 days. And I got tears running down my eyes as I'm taking this dictation. And then he suddenly stops. And it's as if he realized who was typing up this letter.
Right.
And he says to me, "Are you okay?" Well, of course I'm going to say I'm fine. I didn't turn around and look at him. I said, "Yes, I'm fine," because I didn't want to show case on post. And case on post is showing emotions, or upset about something, or anger, or, just showing emotions.
Right.
So because I knew I'd probably get in trouble if I showed emotions. So I'm like, I'm fine. And I just kept typing the letter as I'm crying away. And so after all this, I had a lot of upset on it because I hadn't seen her in a while. I'd had, all these 11 years where I'd been separated from her. And it was a heavy loss for me. Anyway, so I just had to continue with life. And I actually got a letter from a cousin of hers that I didn't even know existed, and she happened to be my godmother. I had no clue because I'd never even been with my mother long enough to even ask about family members in Australia. I knew about my mother's sister and her 2 daughters, but that was pretty much it. I didn't know she had these other cousins. I learned about them after she died, and that one of them was my godmother. And anyway, I did later on go down to Australia and visit my godmother, who I didn't know existed until then. But life continued, and we started getting more and more into doing cine. And so as part of cine, here's a picture of that was put on for it. But cine was created by having all the staff at SU, Special Unit, or WHQ, double hat, doing cine jobs plus doing their regular jobs. You might be, like Stu became the producer, or Norman Starkey became the producer. Whoever was kind of the commanding officer of the base was the producer. Different messengers, like my sister was called up and she was made the cameraman, and Miscavige was doing video, and I was supposed to do makeup, and we all just had different jobs along with this. And we also, when he did different films, we also had to be actors and actresses.
Yeah.
And one of the first films we did was, what was that one? TR 0 to 4, I guess it was, with Dan Kuhn as Joe.
Yeah. Right.
And yeah, so there's Dan Kuhn with Steve Irwin, who worked in
Dan is in
LRH
the blue
External
shirt.
Com. Yeah, Dan's in the blue shirt on the left, and Steve, with his long hair, is in the right. And so Dan was Joe, and the other actor in it was Waldo. There's Waldo there on the left with Rich Cohen.
That's Robert Waldman, right? Robert Waldman.
Robert Waldman. Yeah, Robert Waldman, and everyone called him Waldo. And it was actually Rich Cohen and I were on a recruitment mission that recruited Waldo and Dan Kuhn. And I talked about that in Messenger Series 8, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, and it was fun doing the cine stuff. Hubbard had an RV that would be taken down to the date packing plant where it was set up to do the filming. And on breaks, he'd go into the RV and he'd have Dan and Waldo go into the RV with him, and they'd talk about what they were just doing on the set and how to improve different things. Or, it was just kind of all working and mashing everything out. And at this time, there was actually a thing going around about Joker and Degrader. And you couldn't joke about Scientology, or you'd end up in the RPF and it was said that you had misunderstoods on Scientology if you joked about it.
It actually came out as a bulletin. I remember it was a tech bulletin at that time. Yeah, about joking and degrading. And it means like saying critical, making a joke about Scientology or anything having to do with it, that was considered like bad.
Right. Well, there was an actual incident in the RV, and I'm sitting there, and they're all sitting around talking, and they were making a joke on, they were going to do something that would make it funny in the film. And I don't remember what it was, but it was joking about Scientology. And the three of them were in stitches laughing about how great that would be to put it in the film. So I waited until Dan and Waldo left. And then I said, sir, I really think that if you put that in the film, that's going to be Joker and Degrader. And he looks at me and he says, you're right. So it didn't get in there. But, that's the kind of conversations messengers could have with him. And I just made sure I wasn't going to point it out in front of other people to denigrate him towards them. Mm-hmm. And anyway, so that's what we were doing. And in one of the other films we were doing, we did the tone scale. And this is where LRH picked different messengers for different levels of the tone scale. Like Dee Dee was serenity of beingness, and I was enthusiasm. And he just had us doing different parts. And he was the director, so he directed us as they were taking the shots. And
I remember, was Terry like playing like tennis or ping pong with an imaginary paddle? Wasn't she like, like a uptone thing? Was that her?
I think so. Yeah. And so Hubbard had us all doing different things. And I remember he was directing me to imagine that I was driving a fast car. And that's how I had to kind of express enthusiasm.
Yeah. And he had to approve each person's tone level acting of it, right? In other words, like if you were supposed to be angry, he had to approve that you were angry enough, right? Or, enthusiastic.
Well, he was,
whatever, right?
He was directing it. He was the director. He had to approve who was going to do each level.
And that they did it right.
Each tone, and that they did it right. And then he would work with them on the set. And then once you got it, it was like, okay, let's get the camera rolling. And then, you get it in the can or you have to retake. So, yeah, he did that directly. So, yeah. And then at that same time, Hubbard was working on the new Mark 6.
E-meter.
Yeah, the new Mark 6 E-meter. And I remember he had Dan Swanson, who was really great. He did a whole clay demo using plasticine or clay to do a E-meter that we used. And Hubbard had Gail do the release. Gail Irwin, she was a messenger as well. And so there she is. Hubbard took that picture of her pulling the curtain back to show the new E-meter.
That's Gail right there.
Yeah, there's Gail. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember that. That was like, because it was announced or released, right? Hold on, I'm putting back up the auditor thing. Where's the auditor picture? Yeah, that was put out, and it was the first time that anybody, their general public knew that there was going to be another E-meter. So it was kind of like a reveal. She's got a curtain there that she's pulling back, right?
Yes.
And it's just sort of a tease. You don't see the whole thing.
Right. Yeah. Well, what's it say? It says, Mark 5 E-meter production in high volume, while Mark 6 begins being readied for unveiling. So that was the tease of it's getting ready for unveiling.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, all right then. After that, we continued with our regular work around the base and with Hubbard, and going around. And then we started doing off-base shooting and a location shooting. And a location that was found was called Massacre Canyon Inn, next to Hema in San Jacinto, Gilman Hot Springs. So it was set up for us to go and do some photo shoots because Hubbard had written a script with a Scottish theme to it. So this is when
they had a golf course there. They had a golf course.
Yeah, they had a golf course there.
They needed to do it, yeah.
Right. But before we went to the golf course, we had a shoot that someone had found that we had to do down in a gully with a little river water. And this is where Hubbard's RV was there. Wick Alcock drove it there. And Hubbard and Kimma were in a car. And I remember, and I was driving the messenger car behind them. And I remember we're driving down the highway and suddenly, and I was going, my God, Kimma's driving awful fast compared to how she normally drives. And then the car gets off the highway and pulls into a gas station. So, okay, I follow behind and pull in the gas station. LRH, Hubbard gets out of the driver's seat. I had no idea he was driving because when we left Rifle, he left from the front and the messenger car was out the back. So I went out the back and drove from there and met him out on the road already. So there's Hubbard who's getting out, and that explained why the car was like speeding. and he had been pissed off about something because it was taking too long and, things weren't ready. So he just got in the car and Kim had quickly jumped in and off they took. So, yeah, so he gets out and then Kim takes over driving and the driving is much calmer. And so I follow them to the gully where we're going to do that shoot. And I didn't have a purse with me. So, and I was going to be down there handling some equipment and stuff like that. So I put my keys in the RV thinking, okay, it's going to be there when we're done. When we're done, I come back, the RV is gone. I'm like, oh no, my car keys are in the RV. Where's the RV? Oh, Wick Alcock had driven it to the next location. So my car is there with no keys. Hubbard's now left in his car. The RV is not there. I have to quickly get a ride with some of the Gold staff. Well, they weren't Gold at the time, the Cine crew.
Right.
And get to the next location. So I get to the next location and I'm like telling the other messenger, I got to go back and get the car. I'll be right back. So then I have someone drive me back there. And Hubbard, I thought everything will be okay. He's going to be eating lunch. He won't even know I'm gone. Oh, yeah, he knew I was gone. So I get back and I could tell he was mad at me. and he wasn't as friendly as he was earlier. And someone had told him that I'd left the keys and what had happened. So I have a picture here of Wick. This is a later picture of Wick, who, because he was Hubbard's chauffeur and he was on the ship with us, his older brothers were John and Whack, Richard Alcock, who we called Whack after he shaved his beard and had a mustache. We used to call him El Wacko. And so then it became Whack. And John Alcock was the next brother, and then Wick, whose real name is Warwick. Anyway, Warwick was the chauffeur for Hubbard, and also the one who drove the RV with my car keys in it, when he should have told me before he left, since I was the messenger in charge of the watch. He should have told me he was leaving, but he didn't. He told Kimmer. Anyway, so after all that happened and we get back to the base at Rifle, I get pulled into ethics and assigned a condition of liability. And that is when it's decided, well, everyone else is going to the RPF as having evil purposes. Maybe Janis has evil purposes, so we should get her a list 1 rock slam sec check. So that's where I was taken in, and it was said that I rock slammed on the subject of Mary Sue, because when they do it, they run through a list and just look for a needle reaction. And so they're like L. Ron Hubbard, Mary Sue, Scientology, and it just keeps going down the list of list 1 priority words. So it was decided I was a list 1 RSer, and I was to be assigned to the RPF. And anyway, of course, I was resistive to that. And that, Mark, will be our next series.
Okay. Well, I have some questions for you based on what you told me. So you drove the messenger car and put your keys in the RV, and then the RV van took off, right? So what would have been your responsibility while you were going to get the car coming back? If you said Hubbard was eating lunch, why would he even be upset? You know what I mean?
Well, it was because I was the messenger in charge. I didn't know that the van had left to go get my keys before the RV had left, to make sure I got my keys out beforehand, or because I even put the keys there in the first place. But I had no pockets. So, of course, I put my purse in there with the keys. So
a simple error like that, which is just a mistake, turns into this big deal.
It turned into a nightmare.
Was it like that with Hubbard on other people and other times too?
It really depended. I mean, there was a time like when Jerry called Nikki a black witch or a black bitch. Jerry got in trouble, so Terry was pulled out, and Jerry was locked up and under guard by the Guardian's office, and they also had Mike Meisner under guard at that same time. So they pulled Terry to the Guardian's office, and this must have been run by Mary Sue through Hubbard's direction. And Terry obviously had mutual outroots with Jerry, and the two of them were sent back to Clearwater without Hubbard even talking to Terry, who, she's been with him nearly as long as I had. And at that time, it would have been 10 years that we would have worked for him directly. But she was sent back with Jerry with orders to restart the RPF. And that was in late 76. Mm-hmm. But that's like the answer to your question, because there are moments he did stuff like that, which was totally unnecessary, where we weren't being out ethics or anything like that, or against command intention.
Right. It'd be like making a mistake or being absent-minded about something, whatever. You can be distracted and you forget something and that type of thing, and there we're at. Now, let me ask you another question. Okay, you said, you mentioned to, Hubbard after Waldo and Rich Cohen, said, oh, this would be funny, and, they agreed.
Joe, Dan Kuhn and Waldo.
Yeah, and then you approached Hubbard and said, sir, I think blah, 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 blah. Was that like a normal activity for a messenger to be able to go up to Hubbard and say, sir, blah, 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 you know what I mean? And mention things you notice something?
The only messengers that would do that would have been the senior messengers, because
Right.
we'd been with him long enough, which, and that kind of reminds me of another story, because we used to get Hubbard dressed. One of the males would get him in his underwear or whatever after his shower, but we'd put his socks on and his pants and button everything up. This had happened ever since he'd had the motorbike accident on the ship. And he had problems with his shoulder. And I remember it was my 22nd birthday, and I was sitting on the ground putting his socks on, and I mentioned it was, today it's my 22nd birthday, and he's, oh, happy birthday, honey. And I said, yeah, it's not that exciting. He says, why? And I'm like, well, I liked being 21. And so that's when he said to me, well, just make every year afterwards an anniversary for being 21. and I was like, we were just talking. I'm like, yeah, I haven't done much in my life, and he's like, what? Yes, you have. Look at all the places you've traveled, and the people you've met. There's people who have never even left their hometown, and you've had all this adventure. But, things that, living on the ship, going to different ports, that was great.
You had nothing to compare. You had nothing to compare it to. Right?
Exactly.
In the real world, that was your life. That's all you knew.
Exactly. But those. Oops, I lost an earpiece.
Okay.
But those were the kind of conversations that we had, or messengers would talk to him that way.
So let me compare, like when you talked to Hubbard about that incident, right, or whatever, you could approach and you talk to you about your birthday and all. I want to compare it to like Miscavige, because I worked for him for several years, and you could have friendly conversations with Miscavige, but really though, it was when he originated them, because you didn't want to just start coming in and start, hey, Dave, blah, 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 about something, because he would consider that, you're interrupting his work or whatever. Was it like that with Hubbard too? Or could you talk to him at any time about things, or did you actually have to respect his time, in terms of what he was doing?
We did respect his time on what he was doing. How that all worked was like on the ship or even other locations, you would go in to respond. He'd give you a message and you'd go to the message and you go back and forth, and you go and you stand in front of his desk and you wait for him to look up at you. And it was all business. But if he asked you a personal question, you'd then have a conversation with him. Now, when he would be eating, if Mary Sue wasn't there, the messenger might stand there, or the steward might stand there and talk to him, and it's usually him doing most of the talking. And it could be about anything. And then if he'd get up from his desk and he would go for a walk around the deck, we would talk, we could originate to him if we wanted to. And, I could say, oh, my mother's, feeling attacked by the guardian's office, this, and this happened, or she wrote a daily report for you. Or he'd take a photo of me, and when it came back developed, he'd call me into his office and he'd say, oh, here's a photo, the photo I took of you, send this to your mama, So it really depended on the different circumstances, on if you had a personal conversation or if you were originating something. We might be just hanging over the rail on the ship and something happens and you'd have a conversation about the sea sleds on the deck, or, that person down below, or, we might tell him that so-and-so, if they got in trouble and maybe someone had died and that was upsetting them, we would tell him that. So we kept him very briefed on different things, whether he originated it or not, just so that he knew different things were going on.
How about, did he like gossip? You know what I mean? Like who's going out with who and this and that on the ship and that type of thing?
No, but when he heard it, he let people live their own lives. When there were a lot of people that started sleeping around together, and you didn't know who was with who. That's when in 1972, he did this. It was a leap year. And so Sadie Hawkins, and that's when he said, okay, any woman that can get a man to marry her by such and such a date will get a promotion in rank. And that was his solution to people sleeping around. And it calmed things down. And these women all got married and got promoted in rank. And, but he didn't send it to ethics or anything like that. And he pretty much tried to stay out of that. There was one woman that had 2 guys after her and was sleeping with both, and he found out about it, and he had a message run telling her to make a choice. But that's how he handled it. It wasn't go to the RPF. Yeah, even later on in the years when Barry Stein got sent to the RPF for sleeping with somebody and they weren't married. When Hubbard found out about that when he was at Crescent, he had Barry reprieved because he never came down that I remember on people sleeping around unless it created an upset because they were married and they're having an affair. Mm-hmm. That's when I pretty much saw, or they were underage. Otherwise, he pretty much left it alone or came up with a solution to calm it down.
Got it. Now, the other thing too is that, dealing with Miscavige, when I was talking to him or other people were talking to him, you had no idea at any point that he might flip on you and just go off on you on something you said when you're just having a conversation. Was it like that with Hubbard?
No. Not that I remember. There was times where you might be reporting back on a message and not realize something's going to trigger him, and it might trigger him, but then you knew to calm him down. And sometimes I would just lie and say, oh, well, they're already doing that to handle the problem, just to kind of get him calmed down. Oh, okay. And he calmed down really fast. And then I would go back to that person and say, I told him you were doing blah, blah, and blah.
So you better do
okay. Yeah. And that was the difference between a senior messenger and other messengers, because we knew,
how to do that. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, and then to be honest with you, that's how it was when I was with Miscavige too, because it was the same thing, because he could fly off the handle about something. And then I had to basically say, don't worry, I'll handle it, sir. I basically had to reassure him that, don't worry, I'm going to take care of it. I'll handle it. I'll take care of it. And that would calm him down enough to the point where then I would then go handle it. And then that would take care of it, because it wasn't personal. It wasn't like all of a sudden he got mad and then he was angry at you. You know what I mean? It was at the end, before I left, that he started getting angry at me when I was trying to do the right thing. That's when I felt like I was personally under attack, and I didn't care for that.
Right. No, I mean, having worked with him for all those years, even on the ship, you knew that he wasn't mad at you. And sometimes he was mad at us.
Yeah.
I've had him yell at me because I messed up a message or something like that. But then he forgave pretty fast. And I would always work for getting a very well done or a well done at the end of my watch when I was turning over to someone else, or a good job, honey. I worked for that. And even before, when I'd go on watch, I would be telling myself, okay, you can get through this, keep him calm, everything will be okay. And I would strive to not have him yell during my watch.
No, I get it. I totally get it. In other words, because you don't want to dwell on it all night until your next watch. You know what I mean?
Right. But yeah, or you just don't want to have him upset, because then you've got to deal with the upset, whether it's at you or someone else. Yeah. But then once I did get yelled at, I would then try even harder, or I'd move on and forget about it. And he might bring it up, or totally forgotten about it and just give you a well done anyway.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, good. Yeah, go on.
Another thing I wanted to ask you about from before, just in terms of how you messengers dealt with Hubbard. You mentioned that he'd be sitting in a chair dictating, and you'd be at this was the personal one. But I take it was like that all the time. Like he'd be dictating and you guys would be typing, whoever was taking the dictation, typing out the letter or whatever, right? And was that a routine thing, or did he normally dictate into a dictating machine and you guys had to type it? But this whole live thing and you're typing away, how much pressure was that to get your typing right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, when we were on the ship,
and just so people understand, these were not computer word processors. These were manual
typewriters
that they had to type 80 words a minute on. So it wasn't like today where you just go, oh yeah, da, 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 and erase it real quick. You had to take out stuff and erase it, right?
Yeah. Well, on the ship, he hand wrote everything. And we would sort his paper where he had a white piece of paper, and then underneath that was a yellow carbon.
Yeah, carbon.
It was like tracing paper, and we'd sort that out so that he could just take, he'd have a stack, and all he'd have to do is move the carbon paper between each page, and then pull out the carbon, put it into the next page as he just wrote everything out, and then he had a typist, a secretary, who would type everything. And she even typed down a lot of transcripts for his lectures over the years. And he did have a dictaphone next to his desk, but he usually wrote things. And then when we moved to shore, he was still handwriting until he wasn't handwriting as much, because he had injured his shoulder, and but then when we were in La Quinta, that's when it was worse. But I wasn't with him when he was in Washington D.C. to see it getting worse. But when they set up La Quinta and Rifle, that's where he had the chair and he had the table, and he would just stand there and look at things there, and then sit down. And messengers, we had yellow pads of paper, right. And we would handwrite the dictation, and no one taught us how to abbreviate or shorthand or anything. We just made up our own and tried to keep it as neat as possible, so that when you typed it up, you knew what the words were that you wrote. And then there was times like with Mary Sue's letters where we took that dictation, and even if we screwed it up and X'd out, he didn't care. It's like, just send it.
Would he side check like your dictation or your notes before you actually typed them up? How about after you typed them, would he side check them or no?
Nope.
Would you guys proofread them? Like have another messenger proofread to make sure that you didn't make a mistake?
No, we did have a TC-55, a little recording thing, that kind of
tape recorder. Yeah.
Tape recorder. And sometimes we didn't have that with us, but there was times we did have it, and you'd go back to that and listen to it if you knew you really screwed up. But otherwise, he just wanted it gotten out right away. So when we wrote it on the yellow pad, then we'd go and type that up. But if we were typing at the typewriter, it went out and the way it came out.
How about if you made a typographical error while you're typing and he's dictating, would you just keep going?
You got to keep going. And you might later on handwrite it.
Sir, I need to white out this or correct it.
No.
No. Well, and then I was going to say, in the later years when he was gone and in hiding up at Creston, of course, and I was at the base, right, there was what was called the comm center or the communications center. And that was Susie Bennick was in charge of that. Ted Karbowski was there, and Tanya Chevelle or whatever. They were in there. And anyway, he would dictate in Creston. He had dictaphones, Sony dictaphones that we had our technician. We actually had to have him modify them so that they would voice activate. In other words, if you started talking, it would activate, and if you stopped, it would stop. And so we did that. And so he would dictate all these things. And then these tapes would come to what was known as the comm center. Pat Broker would bring them to DM or whatever. And then they'd all be sitting in there typing out these dispatches, the comm center, and proofreading them. And then they were distributed to the people who needed them. And they would be like 50, 60, I mean, it'd be a lot of dispatches, but that's how he communicated to management while he was in hiding.
Right. Yeah, but no, when it first started, it was anything goes just to get it written down and get it out. And even when we were at X, he sat at the little breakfast table and he didn't write anything. We took all the notes.
Yeah, and like when we used to get those, when we knew the run came in for the comm center and they were typing away, we're all sitting at our desks waiting for it, because you would get your not everybody got everything, but some people, we got a lot of them, right? So then you would get them, you couldn't wait for them to deliver them to your desk so you could start reading through all the stuff that he would send down.
Right.
It was like the 10 Commandments, word on high. Here we come, we got to read these things. Anyway, that was the later years. Anyway, okay, great. Well, Janis, thanks very much for filling us in on that. Just so people know, you can get Janis's autographed copy of her books, Commodore's Messenger. That's Janis. This is book 1 with Hubbard there when she was like 13. And then book 2 is also available there. And you can see Janis there with Hubbard in Portugal, or you were on a photo shoot somewhere, right?
Yeah. That was the day we went to the winery, and I got to see people actually treading in bare feet on the wine and squashing it with their feet.
But you can see in these photos how close Janis was to Hubbard. I mean, she was probably one of the closest, if not the closest person to him during those teenage years as one of his senior messengers. So anyway, if you'd like to get autographed copies of those books, they're available. Just go right down below. You'll see them. There's the products, and she'll autograph them for you. And they're very reasonably priced. You know what I mean? I've seen other autographed books for other people. They charge a lot, arm and a leg for them. But you can order them at our merchandise store, and she'll send them out to you. So if you're interested in reading stories, they have lots of great photographs in them. Get the books.
Okay.
All righty. Well, you're welcome. Anyway, please subscribe to our channel. Rock slam that like button. Somebody keeps saying that. Janis says
that's right.
Rock slam. And then the next episode of Messenger series, we'll go over Janis's rock slamming and in the RPF. But anyway, please subscribe to our channel. It greatly helps us get our message out. Also, if you have any questions or comments, please go down below. Ask away. We check them all. Janis and I love reading them. So give us your feedback. Okay. And then if you would like to support our channel, buy us a coffee. Description down below. There's a link. We appreciate any support that you all might have and want to give it. And then also, if you want to be a member of our channel, it's in addition to joining or to subscribing to the channel, you just go to the join button on our YouTube homepage, join. Use a little video on it. It tells you what you can do. We appreciate the support. We have lots of dedicated members who've stuck around with us while we've been doing this, and we greatly appreciate that support. So just hit that join button on our homepage, follow through, and we would appreciate any new members that we can add to the channel. Is there anything else, Janis, you want to say before we end off today?
No, I enjoyed that. That was fun. So thank you all for listening.
Yeah, and we'll have more of these as we go forward. But until the meantime, everybody, bye-bye. Have a good day.
Bye.